Hello, and thanks for listening to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatyanna. In this episode, psychotherapist and teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, Neale, joins me to chat about his new book, Return with Elixir, 4 Maps for the Soul's Pilgrimage Through Death and Rebirth, a step-by-step guide to reclaiming the soul. I loved this book from the moment I laid eyes on it. It is a manual for spiritual rebirth, revealing how to reframe life's challenges and transitions as opportunities for inner growth. His book integrates Tibetan Buddhism with psychology, trauma healing, neuroscience, and mythology, along with profound personal experience. If you love the esoteric aspects of spirituality, then this is the episode for you. Some of the points we discuss are how the elixir of immortal life is the secret of both Eastern and Western esoteric traditions, and what exactly Return with Elixir means. We explore the themes of the collective unconscious, archetypes, the hero's journey, and the search for wholeness. Miles also shares the 4 maps for spiritual rebirth based on Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, and the precession of the equinoxes. We also discuss Jungian esotericism, and we talk about how the symbolism of the deity Vajra Yogini is an archetype. She is also on the cover of his book. And we talk about so much more. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please write a review and share the episode and follow me on Instagram at The Conscious Diva. Thank you so much for listening. So great to meet you.
And you as well. Thank you, Tatyanna, for having me.
No, you're welcome. I have to say, I really enjoyed reading the book. It's awesome.
Oh, you've dug into that. That's a very good, thorough, thorough excavation of the elixir there.
I read every single book I'm sent. I was a TV producer for a long time. So
Wow.
I read every book that I'm sent. I was really interested when first Gail had sent me your stuff, but so had Manzanita over at Inner Traditions. And
Uh-huh.
I love the cover of the Vajra Yogini. She's a goddess that I've sometimes worked with, and I actually bought a little mini one of her in Kathmandu a few years ago, and I have
Nice.
her. She travels with me. I have her not here in this setup, but with me, here in Sydney. So I was immediately drawn to the cover and just thought, okay, this is going to be a really awesome book.
Don't judge a book by a cover, but go ahead if it's Vajra Yogini. Go right ahead.
But not many people put this on the cover.
Oh no, no. Well, she's the great archetype of the great mother. That's the energy of the new age that we're coming into. So, we all need a little more Vajrayogini. Plus, she's fierce. She's able to really transmute all the desirous energies that we have been accustomed to and addicted to. So, I think she's the right archetype for the moment.
Yeah, totally. So, well, let's just start there because you've got, your book covers so many things, and I literally made so many notes. And obviously, you can see from just all the post-its inside this book, there's just so many things to discuss. But archetypes, obviously, is one of the themes of your book. So, let's just start there. Why are these important?
Why are archetypes appointment? Okay, well, basically for 400 years, maybe a little less, slightly less, our culture has adopted the scientific reductionistic materialistic paradigm, and that's been great for so many reasons. It's allowed us to really create incredible medicine and technology and mathematics and humanism. On the other hand, it has a shadow. And the shadow is that our ability to connect with the numinous has been atrophied. And in a way, we've reached a tipping point where we've become symptomatic of this lost soul, basically, our lost connection with spirit. We have a massive mental health crisis, which is part of this, but we also have an ecological crisis, which is an external manifestation of our disembodied and disconnected way of being. And of course, we're also at tipping points in a number of different areas. I called it, in the book, I called out a number of different areas where this is sort of we're symptomatic of being disconnected. So why archetypes? Well, archetypes, and the same could be said for why mythology, because that's a question I get very often is why do we have to care about mythology? But why do we care about archetypes is because it's really the language of the forgotten or disconnected part of our being. It's the way that the unconscious speaks, and it's the way that we can realign or become resensitized to, our inner natures. It's like dreams are another example of this. The language of dreams is not linear, it's not logical, and it's not literal. But if you can switch your mindset to start to see symbols as representations that have a deeper kind of encoded meaning, and you become fluent in deciphering them, suddenly what's inside of you is teaching you something. You
Mhm.
just have to speak the language. And so, whether it's cosmologies that have archetypal energies, whether it's mythologies that have archetypal stories, whether it's dreams that have an archetypal codes, symbols, whether it's prophecy, which you have to take not literally, but you have to take in terms of meaning making kind of technology. All of these are new ways, new inroads to sacred wisdom, really. And I think that's what. And so what? I mean, okay, but now we're kind of lost. Now I'll give you one example, not to go on a rant here, but one example in the pandemic, we saw a real breakdown in science, our over reliance on science. And how did that manifest? One way that it manifested is that we had these two fractured, divergent groups that were each saying, the vax was working and the vax was not working.
Mhm.
And we have groups of people saying that you had to mask up, and other groups saying that the mask was contraindicated. And both were using studies and scientific research to back up their various claims. And so, who do you believe anymore if you've outsourced your power to science? And so, that breakdown in science really is a harbinger to beckon us to consider that there must be other ways of knowing reality, not just the ones that look through a microscope, but the ones that use the third eye of intuition and the ones that see the language or read the language of archetypes.
I'm going to have you now explain a little bit about what you do because you said a lot. There was a lot there in that first opening the response. And I also just want to mention the name of the book, Return with Elixir: Four Maps for the Soul's Pilgrimage Through Death and Rebirth. There's so much here. You talk about, we just said, the archetypes. Joseph Campbell, you mentioned you begin with the hero's journey in the book, and that theme really continues throughout, giving different examples. And there's a section in your book where you mention, for some people entering this path of whether it's the hero's that journey into oneself, can either be a spiritual seeker, which may happen, just in your life, or for most people, it's some sort of catalytic event where it's really jolting them into this, catastrophe where they have to look at themselves, whatever it is. It could be, some kind of loss, right? Usually it's some kind of loss that's shaking you up and it's forcing you into this moment. And it's something that I actually recently was talking to my husband about because I've left my husband and I'm like, this is your journey. This is your journey. Like you're on your hero's journey now. Like you need to
It's a
look
very,
at.
it's a very, it's a very good parting message.
Well, I'm also coming at it
It's,
from a place of compassion. I'm not just like running away and like whatever. But it's like,
but it's empowering. It's like, yes, I love you, and this could set you off on a way that
yes,
could actually allow this crisis to unfold in such a way that we would look back and say, it actually helped me grow.
absolutely, 100%. So I'd love for you to just expand, share with listeners who may not necessarily be familiar with Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. We see it in so many things. It's not just like Odysseus. It's not, I mean, and that's obviously a great one. A lot of
Mm.
kids today, my daughter's been studying the Odyssey at school recently,
Yeah.
and there's a big film that's coming out, with a lot of A-listers in
Yes.
it.
Yes. Well, Joseph Campbell was a remarkable figure. I remember watching Joseph Campbell when I was a boy in school, and he had a series called the 6-part series with Bill Moyers. The Power of Myth was an unbelievable revelation in high school for me. He was a man that spent 5 years in sort of a hermitage, digesting and metabolizing all of the world's great spiritual traditions, and was one of the first map makers to really sort of catch the convergence of these archetypal themes, these potent archetypal themes, and really was instrumental in getting us out of our dogmatic silos about this religion is better than the others. He was really instrumental in finding the universal commonality. And my book tries to do that too. I try to bring a bridge between various traditions from cosmology and archetypal psychology and mythology and Tibetan Buddhism.
Mhm.
Campbell is that's really in the spirit of Campbell, He designed or devised what's called the monomyth. It's like from the Lord of the Rings, the one ring to rule them all. It's like the one myth that underlies them all, really, is what it is. Most of these myths, whether they come from the Greek tradition or the Egyptian tradition or the Tibetan and Indian tradition or Mesoamerica, have a certain, we could call them milestones in a trajectory, which is cyclic in nature, that's a very important aspect of the mythology, is that you don't just live your mythology, or the hero. Let's start with the hero. The external hero doesn't just live their mythology in just once. It's a perpetual process, as you know, as a spiritual inclined coach or facilitator. You may have someone come into your office who's at a crisis point, and you may help them get to another milestone in which they're really confronting the origins of that crisis point. It may be childhood abuse, it may be something ancestral, it may be something cultural, but there's a sort of confrontation with the psyche in some way. But before that, I mean, you as the facilitator are the mentor, the archetype of the someone who walks side by side, someone who walks behind, somebody who leads, somebody who guides or initiates. And so these sort of themes appear across cultural myths. They are sort of part and parcel of what the journey is all about. You meet a mentor, you get initiated, you find yourself into a horrible ordeal. But within the ordeal, one of Campbell's great quotes, which I love tremendously, is, the treasure that you seek is in the cave that you fear to enter. And
Hmm.
so this is a remarkable, pithy quote that I think our culture really needs to listen to, because I mean, you occupy a position in the wellness space as I do, and what we see around us are biohacks to get to optimal health.
Yeah.
We're trying to perfect not only the circumstance, but also our ability to ascend and to become uber well and to become uber fit and to smash it and to really just go get it and to have optimal length of lifespan and
Hmm.
incredible, agility or acumen physically. But what we forget is that these myths tell us that trial is actually what helps develop us. Crisis is a cocoon for transformation. Fragmentation. In the fragmentation, there's something that is afforded to us that we actually need for the onward journey. And so, after the ordeal, one usually finds a treasure that they wouldn't ordinarily find in any other way or under any other conditions than under hardship. And then, even then, when you finally claim your treasure, which is usually celebrated at the end of a movie with all the credits, it's like you made it. It's not over then either. There is, of course, the return back to make the personal meaningful for the collective. So we each have something to share. And that's what the title of the book is, really. It's Joseph Campbell's final stage of the return with the elixir, our sharing of our boon.
Which I really love. Had a few people ask me who've seen some friends when I'm pulling this book out, what's that book about? And say, well, it's about your journey. It's about your personal journey, your inward journey to yourself, reclaiming who you are and figuring that out so you can come back out and share those gifts with others, the boons, as you say, and help guide them
Mm.
back to the truth of who they are, which often is a sentiment that I think people who may not, or they may be on the beginning of their journey or not at all, sometimes have trouble with understanding what this means, the truth of
I
who you
couldn't
are.
agree with you more. Absolutely. Isn't it? We have an impoverished self mentality where we don't even believe we have anything to offer.
Mhm.
So we
Yeah.
don't, we don't see ourselves in the frame of light that we have anything to contribute.
Expand on that then with we because you just shared what the elixir means, but you've also got these wonderful maps that you have, and as you say in your book, they're syncretic, so they're blends of other philosophies, but they are the guidelines that you use to teach your own clients.
Yeah, I mean, maps are really, in a way, they're important, and in a way where they have to be discarded. There's this tension between maps. I mean, one, don't mistake the map for the actual terrain, but on the other hand, a map we all could use.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a nice, cogent way of understanding the material, especially when you have a diagram, which I have some beautiful diagrams in my book. And I think for beginners or novices or even people who want a refresher, it's nice to see that there are milestones and predictable steps and stages. I mean, we use stage models in all kinds of things, from Maslow's stages of psychological development and etc. Campbell's stages are important to sort of know, because at any one moment you could find yourself in a situation, and you're so close in your own life that you lose sight of the forest. You're so close to the trees, you lose sight for the forest, and it's refreshing to know, like, this is not the end. You won't be stuck there forever. There are certain things that you can do, and that are important in any particular stages. And so, it's refreshing to have a digestible map so that you can orient yourself in the world. On the other hand, and I love these dichotomies because I think everything is always more complex. The map is only a pointer to the terrain, and you still have to walk it,
Yeah.
and you still have to get lost. I have a lot of people say, can this help me? Not get lost. Is that what the map is for? And my answer is, if you're afraid of getting lost, you haven't understood the real meaning of the hero's journey. Because no matter how well guided you are by an expert, no matter how clear the picture is, no matter how well articulated the steps are, it's in getting lost that you
Mhm.
find yourself. And
100%.
so there is this interesting tension between the map and the terrain.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and even with my relationship with my husband, it's I'm guiding him, I'm there for him, I'm showing, I'm like, I'm here for you, but you do need to lose yourself, and that's why it feels the way it feels for you right now, because you're
Mhm.
lost in the emotion of this whole experience. And
Mhm.
until you can figure out why this is happening, why we've arrived at where we're at, you're not going to move forward. It's not, it's just, so here, there's different things. I just share that as a simple in quotes experience for my life. But in your book, you've got a much bigger journey. You're sharing of how you ended up where you are currently now in Bali, and a lot of different things that were going on. And it was COVID, and you were in the midst of writing this book, it sounded like, and then other things were happening, and you decided to relocate your family across the world. That's not a small move. And Indonesia, I mean, it's kind of a random place, but not at the same time for you.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Let me just backtrack, because you said something about your husband, and I think there was something very important, I think, to draw out of it, if you don't mind. I
Oh,
think
no.
when you're saying you need to go on this journey, there's something about those moments where we want to come in and rescue somebody. We want to give them medication. We want to give them the tool. We want to give them the salve. And that's because we're warm-hearted creatures. We don't like to see other people in pain or suffering. But you said, paraphrasing, you said something about, like, you have to learn something about yourself through this. In other words, you have to go on a journey to discover how you got here, why this happened. It's almost like when there's a plane crash, they do a reverse engineering, or they do a postmortem to discover what happened here.
Mhm.
They don't just fix the plane. They don't just move it along. They want There's something important to discover about what the breakdown was about, in order to prevent it, or in order to evolve it, or in order to optimize it in the end. And so I think what guidance you're giving your husband is really, it's the wisdom of the age coming through right now, and reminding us we have so many tools to ameliorate and to, in a way, spiritually bypass, but nothing can really replace honest self-reflection. Because there you have the Buddha's famous medical model of the truth of suffering, the truth of discovering the origin of suffering. And in discovering the origin of suffering, the truth of understanding that there's a cure. And then the treatment plan follows from there. So really, this is not about outsourcing our wisdom journey to other traditions, technologies, way. This is about us discovering something in the inner space. And I think that's so important in a technological age, that we are rehumanizing this adventure. And what it suggests about the human mind is its ability that most of our suffering is self-imposed due to some kind of blindness,
Yes.
and that it could be reversed. As a result of that, it can be reversed. Most of what ails us is our fragmentation, which is about human relations fragmenting, and that can be reversed and healed. So I just thought in that moment there, I thought, oh, you don't minimize this thing that you're doing with your husband, because right in there, you're pointing exactly to what's happening on a cultural level too. Your reminder to your husband is a reminder from the book also. Look within, go deep, and especially when it's painful. There's something there that we need to look at. In my book, at the beginning, I had panic attacks, right? And as a psychologist, that's a bit weird.
Hmm.
And the first line of defense in my institution is to medicate that, let that even that out. Oh, we can take care of that instantly. Here's some Xanax. But for me, I had to understand, what are these panic attacks about? And part of that process led to the fact that, it's not just me as an atomic individual, it's me as a person in relation to this world that has become so fast paced and so confined. I was living in New York, and but New York life is like boxes within boxes within boxes.
I know. I lived in New York City for decades. I know. Actually, and then I lived in Westchester, and I actually currently live in Vermont. That's actually where I live, in a forest in Vermont, which I love.
But
So
you
yeah,
remember
no.
those days of getting
I
up
just
in a
happened to
very
be in
small.
Australia, so I could talk to you
You're
in
in
Bali.
you made it out of the matrix, but we both were there making our coffee at 6 in the morning in a box, only to jump on a subway car box to
Mhm.
make it into the corporate cubicle box, so that we can then anesthetize ourselves at the bar box
Mhm.
and go back into the bed box, and then also just be so, our mindset, the paradigm of scientific reductionism or materialism, is itself a confining box. And so I was having panic attacks because I couldn't bear that anymore, that world. I had something dramatic had to be done. So if I if I anesthetized the symptom, I wouldn't have followed I wouldn't have made the journey into the rabbit hole. So that's what's called the gateway, or the crossing the threshold moment. If you follow these things, the crisis, the breakup, the cancer diagnosis, the loss of income, the market crash, or whatever it is that sends you into a spiral or panic or destabilize you, if you don't go deeper, you miss the opportunity, but you'll only push it off for another crisis.
And most people are so in a state of fear from that, whatever that personal experience has been, that they're blinded by that emotion, that fear. They can't see how this could potentially be of a benefit, that it's happening for them, not to them.
Mm,
Right. And so that's
mm,
something, I think your book, I think it's not, in the beginning when I started it, I thought, this is more advanced for people who maybe already had an understanding of a lot, especially the tantric, practices and things, and the mythology
mm,
and so on, but and the story of the Buddha and all of that. But I think there's so many, anyone can really learn from you and from this book, because as you said before, so many people, we're living in this global crisis right now of
mm,
materialism. Really,
mm.
that's what we've all succumbed to.
Well put.
You had mentioned the word solve before, so maybe explain what this is. You have a whole chapter on solve e coagula and how you break this down.
Oh, Solve coagula is wonderful. It was a wonderful revelation for me. It is a Latin phrase that comes out of the alchemical tradition. Who knows what the origin really is? It goes back as far as Egypt, and if depending on which way you slice it, probably much further. But in terms of the Latin rendition, solve coagula is two words that we recognize as cognate in English. Solve is to solve, to resolve, to heal, or to dissolve, to break down.
Mhm.
And the coagula is the coagulate, or to come together, or to regenerate. And so it is a mythological or alchemical process of transmutation. One arc of it is breaking something down, and another one of them is the rebirth, or the reconstitution. And it's very interesting. It became the single loom upon which all the threads that I was weaving could rest, because in a way, everything that I was looking at was speaking it to this fundamental process. In Campbell, there is a starting place, what's called the ordinary world, and there's a departure. And on the departure, you have to lose everything. The familiar, the comfort zone. You have to leave home. You have to leave all your loved ones. You have to leave all your habits and everything that makes you you. And you have to eventually lose yourself.
Mm.
But then there's the coming back after a great journey. And when you come back, you integrate everything that you've learned and you arrive back in the same place, but you've been transformed. So that great line of you can never put the same foot in the river twice, is this idea that if you go on a concerted conscious journey of transformation, you'll never return home the same, even though your home may be the same, your relations may be the same. You have transformed. So there's Solve Coagula from the Campbellian point of view. Jung also talked about it. Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, who is very revealing of his own personal journey of fragmentation. For many years endured what could be conceived of as a kind of lucid psychosis. He allowed himself to have a kind of undoing, to come undone. In fact, I mean, the way that described in his journals is that, you know, by day he was seeing his patients and serving as a support for their own process, and by night he would allow himself to will have what he would call the confrontations with the unconscious, in which he basically lost the line between reality and unreality. And so, and there, his book, the great Red Book, are his journal writings and his discoveries and his hand paintings of the journey into the Netherlands, into the unstable and the numinous.
Well, I want to come back
Uh,
to the Jungian esotericism in a minute, because there's so much on that, and you're weaving him throughout your entire book as well. But you, with Solve Coagula, was it your line where you say it's the art of the mystical experience?
yes, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So Jung had a fragmentation of the psyche, and then he would come back to reality.
Hmm.
He started off more of a scientist aligned with Freud, and he departed from Freud and came back a mystic.
Mm.
And then I use Tibetan Buddhism, which is one variant of esoteric spirituality. You could use Sufism, you could use mystical Christianity, you could use Zen, whatever you would, Kabbalah.
Hmm.
They're all essentially saying the same thing. This identity that we are fixated on undergoes a process of unraveling or dissolving. And this is also very common in the psychedelic revolution that's happening now, where ordinary people with no religious predilection have this experience of loss of identity and loss of coherent reality. But it's a healing journey. Something breaks down, but then something opens, and those two things come together. And that's very, very important. The breakdown, the solve, is a doorway for the rebirth, and you can't have one without the other. So don't try to avoid your breakdown.
Yeah, yeah. I know, we laugh at that, but but it's true. And it's, if you can give yourself the permission to dive in, there's such a reward on the other side of that. That
Yeah,
in that moment when it seems like you're drowning, uh, there's no way you can really understand how moving forward in that space is going to free you, to have a better life. How is this going to happen? But then as you go on that journey, as you figure out and you swim to the other side, or you get out of whatever you're stuck in, you can eventually look back and reflect and realize, wow, wow, so much has happened. Holy shit, this is amazing.
that's right.
Wow. I'm going to tell everyone about this. Go on this journey. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing with Jung, like how you describe the mandala, or he's describing it, I guess, and this symbology of the self, the mandala as this symbol for the self. My practice is in the Khas Nepali traditions, and my teachers are 27th generation Nepalese shaman, but I also practice Kashmir Shaivism for a very long time, and so I'm familiar with the mandalas and the visualization and the deity work and so on. But it's funny, I had never really sat and thought, oh, the mandala is like you know, a metaphor for the self. So can you expand on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm fascinated first and foremost by your background. I didn't realize you were a Shaivite devotee. That's wonderful to hear. And I'm always interested in the dialogue. What similarities, commonalities can we find between the Tibetan Vajrayana and the Kashmir Shaivitism? Because I do think that there's a common origin somewhere, which I write about in the book. Interestingly enough, maybe this will be interesting. I also write in the book about the Borobudur Mandala.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. I know that was amazing. And that photo you have in the book, actually, I'm going to open it up because it's phenomenal. That aerial one that you've got, that's just feels, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? That's wonderful.
That's an
Uh,
amazing aerial image. It almost looks like a painting. It almost looks fake. It's so good.
yeah, 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 amazing. Well, in Kashmiri Shaivite, when we had I won't spoil the book too much, but part of the archetypal journey as it unfolds is that I had a vision of putting two masters at the top of the Borobudur Mandala, which is the largest mandala on the planet. It's from the ninth century, the Selender dynasty in Java. And my teacher is a Vajrayana master of the Tibetan tantric tradition, and but in the vision he wasn't alone. He was there in consort or in dialogue with a local master of the local indigenous Shaiva tradition.
Mm.
And and the story, towards the end of the chapters reveals this sort of breadcrumb trail of the collective unconscious leading us to the mandala and this joint ceremony, which is a revival of a spiritual heritage that may have gone back 5 centuries. There used to be a tradition of Shaiva Buddha where these two traditions were actually united and practiced as one. And the Islamic invasions put that to an end, and time went on, and then scientific reductionistic paradigm came in, and that tradition was lost. And now there is just the edifices of these stone monuments, but part of the part of the motivation of led by this vision was to lead a pilgrimage group to the greatest mandala on the planet and reenact this joint ceremony in a kind of homage to a revival of these traditions.
What did that involve? The rituals, the ceremony of that. Like,
Sure.
how did that work? I'm really curious. And I was curious in the
That's
book too.
okay. I mean, it allows me to plug a documentary series that we shot that un actually follows us through 5 days on a sacred mountain in Java, Mount Lau, with these masters who just met, and they hatched the plans and how we would do it.
Wow.
So the documentary series is free. It's on YouTube. It's called The Missing Piece, the Peace.
Okay.
I've also got a QR code direct link in the book because I think these two things, it gives a wonderful visual epic, and it also invites in the viewer. I mean, the whole point of Matthew Friedel's vision for the movie was to invite you on a pilgrimage with us so that you could participate in this ceremony of the ages at the top of this mandala. So that's the missing piece on on YouTube by Matthew Friedel. But you asked me about the image itself or the archetypal significance of the mandala. It's slightly different in different traditions. So the Buddhists would say that the mandala is the palace of a deity.
Mm.
Okay, so what we're talking about is a regal lord or lady at the center of a universe who is guiding on the principles of wise justice and compassion. And so you incubate yourself at the center of the mandala. You undergo this process of dissolving and re-arising as a deity. So the you that you think you are dissolves or dies, and all your egocentric inclinations dissolve with it and are transformed into compassion. And then you reign supreme at the center of your mandala, not as an unjust ruler, but as a just ruler whose main purpose is to create the conditions that would be necessary to ripen sentient beings.
So
Okay, so that's
different.
sort of the it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's such a lovely philosophy. I mean, it really is turning the heart inside out so that you're not just on the throne ruling and getting your egocentric mets and needs met. your sole purpose. You derive optimal evolutionary purpose by creating the conditions necessary for other living beings to awaken. And that becomes the sole driver of meaning and purpose in your life through countless lives. And that's all there is to it. And it's synonymous with the yogic tradition idea of Leela, that
Yeah.
what is the sublime play of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Jung had a slightly different take, though no less beautiful and exceptional, which was the mandala is a crucible for the union of opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, here we have the part of our crisis right now is that we have not integrated the shadow. And if you don't integrate the shadow, then the shadow gets projected onto the world. So, for example, the incredible moral bankruptcy of our leadership across the planet if you want that to change, you can't just be a social justice warrior banging your head against the wall and ranting and raving about how change should happen. From a Jungian point of view, and certainly from a Buddhist point of view, that kind of outward facing protest is only but half the solution.
Mm-hmm.
The other half is that if you whatever you don't like out there, you have to take responsibility for in here. And so Jung's idea of the mandala is that inside you have a lot of darkness or shadow material. You have aggression, you have egocentrism, you have deep, deep, insidious desires, you have selfishness, you have all kinds of vices. And you have to bring those into the light of awareness, and you have to conjoin them with love because they're basically trauma. They're basically scarcity trauma and fragmentation trauma. And so the only way for there to be a harmonious world is there for us to have a sort of inner harmony. First, where we make peace with our inner demons. There's one tradition in Tibetan Buddhism called the Chöd practice, which is feeding the demons, that basically is essentially going in and all the things that you fear and that you hate and that you long for, you make contact, you make relations with them. And here, as you know, you've probably come to Bali many times. The Balinese do this with their ceremony every day. They set out chanang, which are these beautiful parcels of flowers, 4 or 5 times a day because they're not only beseeching the deities that they admire and aspire to be like, the kind and benevolent ones, but they're also feeding the demonic ones because at least it keeps them in relations. They can keep them within sight. They don't forget about them. So if you forget about the demons inside of you, the demons will control you.
Mm-hmm.
So the mandala is a place for relationality and for balance and for harmony. And that is what the self is. It's a self that is transmuting the toxicity inside of us, not avoiding it, not painting over it, not pretending it's not there, but putting it into direct contact with the light of love and awareness.
That's a really beautifully put way of explaining the mandala, because they're so complex and there's so when you look at them and there's so many, that especially if I mean you don't have illustrations in your book of ones that directly relate to specific deities, like say Kali as an example, or Durga, but and they're more geometric in nature versus the Tibetan Buddhist ones that have images of deities around the entire image,
Iconography, yeah.
right? So there's so many, and that's, I think, sometimes people aren't maybe sure how to work with one. Do I look at the
Mm,
image, or do I use a deity, or do I use both?
mm,
And how
mm,
do I, especially people who may not be working with a teacher or a skilled adept, because we have the internet now that anybody can kind of get online and find an image of something and, go, oh, that looks cool, and stick it on their wall and not actually realize the power in it.
mm,
There's a lot of that. But ultimately, it brings us back to love. And you have this beautiful phrase in the book, the nectar of love, right? That you talk about this all of this, the elixir. I mean, that's bringing
mm,
back, cultivating loving awareness within ourselves so that we can be that love and represent,
mm,
and then share that, activate that
mm,
love with others.
mm. I wish I could hear more about you and your story, your background. I mean, you were just describing those beautiful geometric patterns of the mandala from the Shaivite tradition, and I thought, oh well, we should have a cup of tea sometime and go for a deeper conversation.
To do that.
When
I
when
know.
are you coming to Bali?
I was telling my friend that the other day that I'm interviewing you, and he was like, "We should go to Bali." Bali. I'm like, I come on this
Yeah.
trip. I don't have the time, but yes, I love that actually. And I watched your videos, and you have some really beautiful things. But I really wanted to know about your offerings because you have some really beautiful offerings on your website with the gradual path. What tell us about those. What do you do? What happens on the gradual path? I love the name.
The
Because it's
gradual
not a
path is
hack. The gradual path, this is not a hack, right? Like this is a practice
no,
that has to
it's
be
the
done.
anti-hack.
Yeah.
It's the anti-hack. It's the slow, boring, unsensational,
Hmm.
not well marketed. You'll never find me out there. This, like it's buried under this and that. You'll never
Hmm.
find it. Don't even go searching for it.
Not true. It's on your website.
It's
You get the people
some
who are
things,
ready
some
for that.
some things are best. I have one of my teachers, and it's nice to talk with somebody who has deep devotion, and you study with a teacher, and we are in positions of responsibility in the care for others, but we ourselves are also apprentices to others. I think that's beautiful. That's nice talking with you about that, and I'd love to know about your adventures with your teacher in Nepal. And I just came back from an adventure to my teacher's homeland, which is up in the Himalayas
Mm.
in the valley called Sum. And you know I realized there that part of my 5 year journey writing the Elixir was my own process of dissolving and reinventing myself and rebooting. And my adventure coming to Bali is just one piece of that. But I used to be a very industrious clinician, psychotherapist, psychologist working in Manhattan. I used to see 30, 40 people a week. And, one of the realizations I had in Bali when I left it all and I finally was quiet, deafeningly quiet, and I wasn't industrious, and there were no more phone calls, and there were no more patients, and I had lost more than half of my income stream. And I would look in the mirror, and I found that I was unrecognizable to myself. All my identity cues from reality had been dissolved, really, literally. I mean, I was at the height of my career in Manhattan. I had a position, a prestigious position in an institute. I was publishing research. I was seeing clients. I had a good enough reputation that I didn't have to market to keep my business and my family fed. And I gave it all up. And it was a several year period of coming to the dark night, including a medical condition, including just not knowing who I was or where I was going, including how am I going to feed my family, including what the inner journey revealed was that a lot of my ambition and my struggle for validation was really about healing a very deep, insidious sense of insecurity and fundamental inadequacy. That actually I had created much of a big edifice about being a reputed therapist because I felt so insignificant underneath. And that, when the phone stopped or when the invitation stopped, I wasn't getting any reinforcement. And what that afforded me was I could just begin to integrate what I call integrate my insignificance. And some people hear that and instantly their initial reaction is that they want to come in and sort of rescue me from my insignificance. They want to say, "Oh no, but you changed my life and you helped me so much. How can you say no?" I'm not saying that that part isn't true. I did make an impact on people. I did offer a contribution. But what I was resisting in the privacy of my own mind was a deep-seated sense that I had carried from childhood that I was invisible and insignificant. I had really nothing to offer. And actually, I needed to spend some time with that part of me. It was what they might call an exiled part of me. And no amount of acrobatics or accolade would ever heal that part. So I would say I'm in the midst of still healing that, but at least that little part of me, that little boy in me that was craving my dad's attention or whatever it might be, has been seen and is now part of the conversation. And so what has that done is it has transmuted all that impulsive, compulsive drive to succeed. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of energy. And slowly, slowly, it has calmed down a little bit. I can reallocate it now. I can actually stop a transgenerational pattern because now I can actually see my boys and spend more time with my boys instead of becoming the compulsive dad that I had, who was chasing validation and the next business deal and the next whatever. Bali has been in both a crisis and a refresher, rejuvenation. My relationship with my wife has transformed. My relationship with my children has transformed. My relationship with myself has transformed. And the way I work has transformed. So part of this is to answer your question, what do I do now? I spend less time doing psychotherapy, although I still have a few clients, but now I've replaced it with pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is my new modality. I think that pilgrimage is a kind of therapy. I think it has always been a kind of therapy. And you're smiling because I know you have stories of pilgrimage. How could you not? How did you find your shaman teacher and where do you have to go to? Tell me a story about pilgrimage.
So I went on a pilgrimage with him in Nepal, but I mean, before I even got there, my journey was I grew up in five-star hotels. I totally had this experience that was incredibly superficial and materialistically driven to be, from babyhood throughout my life, to be born into a world that is literally about show,
Mm,
preparing the environment for guests and making sure it is as perfect as it can be at that
mm,
five-star hotel level.
mm,
And it really affected me because I thought that that's how I had to appear outwardly in the world. Like I thought I
mm,
had to, and a lot of it was also to impress my dad and to, make sure I had like, that I worked a good job and, it sounded fancy and it sounded cool and whatever, all these things that ultimately when we get on our path, when whatever jolts us in our life to shake us up and realize, snap us out of it, you realize that doesn't matter anymore.
mm,
Right? It's not important. There's other things that are so much more important, but we first need to sit with ourselves and heal. And at the moment, and part of these practices that we're involved with, what's really beautiful from time to time in my practice, because there's a lot of different deity, look, I'm going to use the word worship, but involvement, the right one will always come, appear at the right moment. And so recently I had Bagalamukhi come and I was like, oh, wow, okay. We're talking silence. You had said the word like silence, and I'm like, wow, like this Devi of golden silence. But it's not just that. Like there's so much, as you talk in your book, there's all these esoteric meanings in everything. She doesn't just mean never speak again. There's like in that profound silence, we're able to go and really connect to that our Dharma. Have those profound experiences where you can have these epiphanies where you're like, oh, that's what I'm meant to be doing. That's the truth. Like that is my path, right? So when I actually went on a physical pilgrimage with my teacher, to physical, like used my legs, walked up a freaking mountain in
yeah,
Nepal, like, for
yeah,
3 weeks and stayed with mountain shamans and had all these incredible experiences where we were doing rituals.
yeah.
I was ready for that. I was ready for that because we were going really deep and I was not staying in five-star hotels. We were in, what it's like we were literally in
Yeah.
mountain villages where there's maybe 10, kind of houses, structures in the countryside on the side of a mountain. It's freezing cold, but and damp and wet, and the bathrooms are certainly not anywhere near Western standards, but it wasn't
Or
that.
5 star, the furthest thing from five
Oh my
star.
God, polar opposite. And it was amazing because I was just like, I need to do this. I need to be having this experience
Yeah.
of understanding how to let go. Like, and that these people here are hosting us. This is their life. And look how happy they are. And they're so generous. And they're preparing food, the cabbages, that was all that was growing. But that's what they could do anything with the cabbage leaves. It was amazing. They made a curry, they made a soup, they made, whatever, and rice. And so it was really, and then of course we're working with the Nagas in that tradition. They work with the serpent deities, the Nagas, and so we were doing a lot of activations with the Nagas, being in nature in the mountain and having them come forward and so on. So that's there you go. That's a pilgrimage story of mine.
And I mean, but all of that to say, it's pilgrimage. Could you ever compare it to months of therapy in a seat? Is there, like I'm not discounting and poo-pooing because I still do it and I still believe it and I stand by my career and I stand by my training. But there's something really potent about the times that we're living in that calls for stronger medicine.
Mhm.
And I found that I mean, it's not like they can't be complementary. I mean, you asked me about the gradual path offerings. It is an ecosystem in which individual psychotherapy, pilgrimage, online courses, and service projects are four pillars. Now, the pilgrimage is not something that you can do regularly. It's like, once a year, once a lifetime, maybe. It's like the big catalyst that is really so remarkable, so fully transformative. There's nothing like it. You're with your teacher, you're immersed in the culture, you're immersed in the practices, you're immersed in the lineage, you're immersed in the power spots of these places that are 1,000 or 2,000 years old.
Mhm.
And it's just as potent as a psychedelic knock,
Oh,
you
100%.
know, without well, even pilgrimage has its own shadow. I mean, try to come back from pilgrimage and come back and reintegrate into a society and into reality. And then you get the question, how was your pilgrimage?
Oh, well, I mean, I have this serious question to ask you, like the importance of integration, because I think there's a lot of people that don't actually integrate. They don't understand why that's so important and necessary.
Mm,
Like when I came back from that pilgrimage, my husband, this was several years ago, had it we had friends from Australia staying for 4 or 5 days, and I was just
mm.
literally the first day, and I was like,
Yeah,
this is the
yeah,
last thing I want to do, and to be
yeah,
entertaining and coming back into this Western environment and have to
yeah,
show up for friends or whatever. Not that I didn't want to be around them, but I needed that time to
yeah.
sit and be with the experiences and be with my inner world and be alone and just be in that space to continue to feel what I had just gone through, what had just been communing with me, what I had been merging with. There was a lot of inspiriting that was happening versus
Mm,
being possessed, let's say. And so those were deeply profound. And it was
mm.
such a struggle to have to come back. But then I also recognized, okay, I live in the West. This is the struggle. The struggle is real. Like, and
Yeah,
I would say to my husband, it's not a meme. It's not a meme.
mm,
The
yeah,
struggle is real.
yeah,
It is actually a
yeah,
fact.
yeah, yeah,
Understand what this means. It's a fact. We create the struggle, we live it, and we just suck it up and then complain about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, what you're describing is solving et coagula.
Hmm.
Okay, on the one end, the departure to pilgrimage requires a letting go and a surrender and a dying.
Yep.
But then you don't just come back transformed. You actually have hardship on the back end, back in, because you're integrating slowly and you can't be the same person, but it's your husband and it's none of them have changed and they still see you the same way and it's not their fault. How could they know anything different? And you've got to find a new way to fit in. And that struggle is the reintegration. It's the coagula. And maybe, I mean, we are used to quick fixes and we're used to quick processes, but maybe that takes years. I mean, we forget that some of these practices and processes they're meant to be lifelong and their timelines. That's why I call it the gradual path. And even if that includes psychedelics, which is one of the most potent solvate coagula processes, it's still all the priming to get you really ready for set and setting, and all the back end integration takes time. And sometimes it's a lot longer than we expect and a
Mhm.
lot harder than we expect. The world is not ready to receive us, and the paradigm is not necessarily ready to receive us. Our husbands, our spouses, our children, and the institutions that we operate in aren't ready to receive us. And so there's like this almost like a, a, a re-entry, like a satellite or a spaceship re-entry process that is, again, filled with challenges that help us find the right language. And how do I preserve my practice? And how do I preserve my mindset? How do I preserve my worldview and still find meaning in what I do? And maybe I have to change what I do. And I try a few things and it falls flat. And I try a few ways and certainly you lose people on this journey. You do lose people, right? And in a way, that's part of the purification. It's a snake shedding its skin. It's like, yeah, this one really needed me to be codependent with them, and I've changed. I'm not that way. I won't do that anymore. And guess what? They're out. They're just out. Or maybe you're better with your boundaries and you say, I just, I'm giving you fair warning. I can't do these things anymore. And then you're out. So that's all the back end transformation, whether you're doing a meditative process, whether you're doing a pilgrimage, whether you're doing a psychedelic, journey. This is what I talk about in the final part chapters of the book about the reintegration process. It's not all that pretty. It doesn't wrap itself up nicely like a Warner Brothers or like a Disney movie.
So this is not a yoga retreat. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go and I come back and I feel relaxed.
Plenty of those in Bali, I can tell you.
I know. And that's okay.
That's okay. It's a different thing. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, for some people, that is just the first step that they need just to even sense how wound up and stressed they are. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And that there's another thing that they could possibly doing with their time, precious resources, and what's called precious human life in the Buddhist tradition, than to go out and have a party and to enjoy some of the luxury centers that your early life was about. Yeah. There's more to life than comfort, and there's more to life than having a good time.
I loved how you mentioned the serpent in the Eve and Adam story as the archetype, the trickster.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was so great. And I have had several conversations recently on other podcast episodes, not mentioning the serpent as a trickster, but the whole what you share here in terms of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life and Eve and opening up to wisdom. So
Mm.
I'd love for you to just tell that story, this misinterpreted story that we all have been.
That's good. You put it as it's a misinterpretation. It's going to leave me up to a lot of criticism, but we could call it a more
It's
esoteric
one version, isn't
inter.
it? The one
It's
that
one- it's
most
an
people
yeah.
told. I've been told it's one
It's it,
version, and then there's another version that is esoteric for sure.
yeah. It's an esoteric version of the Adam and Eve story where Eve is cast as the misanthrope that leads to the descent of humankind, opens the doorway to sin. She's the work. She is the one that takes the apple and eats the apple first, right? So the idea is that there's two trees in a garden. People don't recognize that there's normally two trees. One is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One is called the tree of eternal life. And the apple is picked from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And in this perspective, this esoteric perspective, Eve is actually the more sensitive one. She's the more empathic one. She's the more intuitive one. She's Prajna. She's Vajra Yogini. She's the goddess. She's in touch with the earth. She's in touch with the animals. She's in touch with the archetypal language. And she in the Garden of Eden, there is not the garden of perfection. The Garden of Eden is the garden of naivete. It's the garden of idealism, childhood idealism, fantasy. And so what she does by eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is that she begins to see that there's duality. There isn't just idealism. There's harsh realities out there. And and what she does is she triggers a set of consequences that gets both her and Adam expelled from the garden of delusion or of illusion, which is actually a good thing. We would call that in modern kind of parlance a rude awakening. She's responsible for having a rude awakening in which she disobeys the authority figure, but wins or gains her own independence, her own life. And so she's cast out into the world and she has to struggle. And that's not a punishment, that's a purification from an esoteric point of view. She gets to undergo a purification where she loses or sheds the illusion of a child and gets the harsh reality of an adult that has to navigate a complex world of chaos And every myth, in a way, speaks to this. That is our encounter with reality. We're all looking for the Shire. We're all looking for the safe haven. We're all looking to stay comfortable. We're all looking to stay small. We're all looking to be spoon-fed in our five-star, I don't know what chain that you worked for, but our five-star luxury thing. But Eve is the one that initiates, the process of losing heaven, of losing illusion, of losing delusion, of going on the journey of hardship, of embracing reality for its complexity, and of initiating her own capacity to navigate reality. And it is a circular journey, right? Because they get outcast out of Eden and they make their way through great hardships, which awaken them to reality, not to deception. And then they get to return to finally taste the fruit of the other tree. They pass the threshold guardians, the cherubim, and they get to taste of the tree of eternal life. And God didn't want them to just have the fruit of eternal life. He wanted them first, actually, to know the difference between good and evil so that they could make a better choice. And that we have to understand that that's one of the moral stories of this reinterpretation is that you can't just masquerade as being compassionate. You have to know that you have evil within you and you have to contend with your own shadow and your own darkness, your own ability to be a Hitler, your own ability to kill someone, your own ability to commit suicide, your own ability to navigate the dance between the abyss of existential annihilation. You have to contend with that as a human being. And only then, when you come like Jung did from the frontiers of those Neverlands, can you reconcile what it means and appreciate what it means to be good and what it means to be noble and what it means to be pure. You don't get to be pure without first wrestling with your impurity. You don't just get to jump over and taste the tree of eternal life. You have to earn it. And it's because of Eve's genius that we actually get the noble reward of hardship so that we can understand the difference between good and evil, so that we can morally choose to live a straight and narrow a life, a noble life. Then you can taste the elixir. The final bit of that story is that each of us can taste this elixir where we finally realize we are not just one little bit of reality, we are all the totality of reality. We live forever. Our soul is forever. And that changes everything when you realize that your soul is ever forever. In a world of infinite consequences, suddenly you become much more responsible. It makes sense to be responsible. So, part of the problem now with our current paradigm is that we think that we eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Once we die, the chemistry and the electroactivity in the brain and the heart cease. That's it. We're done. We're over. And because we're a nothing, essentially, we're nobody going nowhere, and we're worth nothing. We can destroy the planet in our pursuit for temporary satisfaction. But all ancient cultures before the advent of industrialized materialistic paradigm realized we are forever. We are forever intertwined. We are forever inhabiting forms as a consequences of our actions. So it isn't just about temporary eat, drink, and be merry. It's about being responsible and having a purpose. And so all of that is baked into this as exoteric rendering of a very universal story, very common story.
Thank you so much. Awesome. I was going to ask you about, obviously, you've got Death and Rebirth in the title. We've talked so much about that. But the Bardo, we did not mention what the Bardo is. I don't know if that's probably a long, well, it is a long explanation. That's not a quickie. And actually, the way you just, described the story of the Garden of Good and Evil is such a sweet spot to almost conclude this conversation. But I'd love for you to just expand on the Bardo if you don't mind.
No, I'd love to. I mean, it's a good way to end because it will, I hope, to draw your listeners into how to make it applicable for them because currently, as a civilization, we're in Bardo. So from the Tibetan point of view, life is cyclic. There's death transforms into bardo, or between, a liminal space, and then there's rebirth. And then from rebirth, old age, sickness, death, bardo, rebirth, round and round and round. And from a civilizational point of view, we have reached the tipping point and we're on the cusp of multiple transitions. From the Vedic science point of view, we have just transitioned past the Kali Yuga, March 21st, 2025, according to the research by Bibhu Desmeshra, who's recalculated the Yuga cycles, which are on order of 25,000 years. So we are just crossing over a several thousand year span into a new age. It's called the Bronze Age, Dwapara. But we are right on the cusp, so we're in between, which is why our civilization is breaking down and institutions are breaking down and things are no longer working and there's a lot of strife and we're basically coming out of a dark age of egocentrism and materialism. But the hopeful message for your listeners is that we're actually on the upswing, what's called the ascension swing. And so what we do in this bardo is really critical because we are responsible. We are the first generations who are laying the foundation for a civilization that is just in formation. And so the more that we can align with the inner sciences and do our purification and go on pilgrimage and do the meditation and meet the shadow and do the alchemy, the more we will discover, as both Adam and Eve did, the difference between good and evil, the more that we can self-regulate and align and properly conduct ourselves, the more we will create new institutions just out of the rubble of the old that will actually be more egalitarian, they will be more sustainable, they will be more mindful, they will be more, better resourced, they will have much more longevity because of this internal alignment and because of this internal process. This is an absolutely critical and pivotal time in civilization. It is the dawn of a new age. Not only the Yuga system is telling us that, but also the astrology between the Piscean and the Aquarian age. We are amidst that too. Anyway, so that's all in the book. We're actually in the bardo of three massive cosmic cycles. And so this is the time for our culture and our species and our friends and our communities to get right with ourselves, because we have a huge responsibility, and actually it will also deliver us a tremendous amount of purpose. Now, this is the same time as like AI is coming in and doing away with half our jobs, but don't be scared of that. Don't be scared of that, and don't let the external forces of the collapse hijack your amygdala. Keep going inside, keep listening to your own intuitive wisdom, keep trying to align with better energies, keep sorting out yourself as Jonah did in the belly of the whale. Go for redemption and then come back out and try to make whatever positive contribution you can make in your sphere of influence. That's basically the message of the Elixir.
I love that. That is so great. Thank you. Thank you very, very
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this great conversation.
So, okay, all your websites.
If you just make it to gradualpath.com, you'll find my book, my pilgrimages, the online courses, my private therapy, and the service project, which is also a beautiful, this is what I'm talking about. How do you engage? We have projects that you help people just express their compassion and their goodwill and to feel that they're part of something bigger. So there's service projects there too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. This was amazing. I've really,
Thank
really
you, Tatyanna.
thank you. So good.
Wonderful to connect.
You too. Thank you.